You can easily spot the slight difference that from advanced computing to research, we changed to advanced computing for Eos, indicating that we deliver the same or even more, but this time for different types of stakeholders. So let me start with the brief introduction of the administrative part of the project. The project was invited for grant agreement under the InfraEOS 07 H2020 call, and under that there are 6 topics. This project targets topic A1, which is distributed and cloud computing resources. And with the project, we aim to establish the compute platform for the European Open Science Cloud, as well as we contribute to the recently highlighted data commons structure of Eos by delivering compute capacity, different types of platforms, different kind of value-added data spaces, services, as well as tools that help us stitch all this together and align the delivery with other major European federations from the cloud and HPC area. The project itself is expected to start in January next year. The budget size is 8 million euro from the EC grant and 2.4 million euro contribution from the EGI.EU participants. This contribution from EGI mostly focuses on the higher level platforms and on the federation services that are needed to operate professionally the infrastructure itself. This detailed objective splits into 5 more specific objectives, which I try to here position along this now, I can say, well-known Eos minimum viable product diagram, which outlines Eos into 3 segments. One is the Eos core, the second is the federated data layer, and then the Eos exchange with various services contributed from different initiatives and stakeholders. And as you can see here, I positioned EGI-ACE as a slice that cuts across this federated data in the Eos exchange layer, touching the Eos core. The 5 objectives that you can read on the right side basically describe that the project will deliver the cloud compute platform and engage with the suppliers in the broader sense, the compute providers. Objective 2 is about contributing to the data strategy with data spaces. The third objective is bringing all this into the Eos, naturally through the Eos portal, and interfacing the systems with the different elements of the core, including the policies, including the interoperability frameworks, and so on and so forth, as does Mature. Objective 4 and 5 are more external looking. Objective 4 is about aligning with the broader global open science cloud initiative, and there was a perfect kickstart already of this activity yesterday and today in the conference with the Global Open Science Cloud workshop. And objective 5 is about expanding the demand side, the user side, across different sectors and disciplines. The consortium includes more than 50 institutes, 33 direct beneficiaries, and 22 third parties, has a very broad coverage of countries, not only from Europe, but most of Europe is covered, but also through partnerships in China, in Taiwan, in the USA, and in South Africa. And the consortium is largely driven by the service providers. This project is different in that sense from previous EGI projects and even from the Eos project, namely that the budget dominated by service provisioning budget that is distributed to service providers through the virtual access funding mechanisms, and 27% of the total budget is aligned and allocated for that purpose. These providers are segmented into different layers, as you will see later, basically the fundamental compute layer, storage layer, access management and managed platforms, higher level applications and data spaces layer, and the federation services that tie the elements together into an interoperable infrastructure. This architecture is shown here with a bit more details. At the bottom, you can see the compute elements, the clouds, both public and research institutional clouds, HTC and HPC systems, on top of which you can see different federation elements. One is to enable access to the compute resources, identity management, and data management. On top of that, there are more computational capabilities offered by platforms such as for interactive computing, for automatic scalable deployment of clusters, artificial intelligence application support, and workload management support. And on top of that, there can be even the hosted applications and data sets. Here on the slide, you can see that we are focusing on three main areas primarily, but not only. Primarily to green data, data space, the health data, and the fundamental sciences. I will come back to that in a minute. All these different elements are exposed by the project as services and will be integrated into the Eos portal, or will be continue to operate in the Eos portal, because several elements are already in the Eos portal as the result of the Eos Hub project. And of course, the project will run a service management system, operational tools, different processes, and further develop policies to govern this whole architecture and infrastructure in an open manner. So let me start going through the layers of this architecture, starting from the bottom with the compute facilities. The main purpose of the project is to provide a compute infrastructure. So this is a fundamental element in the project. We have cloud HTC providers as well as HPC providers, which I will detail on the next slide. Altogether, they will provide capacity in a phased manner with an increasing capacity allocation in 3 times 10 months long periods. We decided to go for this approach because we know that Eos will mature over the years, as well as the communities that are involved in the project will mature over the years. So we can achieve more by doing a phased increase of the allocation. These providers receive different kind of funding mechanisms to deliver this capacity. On one hand, the project provides virtual access, and this is the main element. This is what I said earlier, a new element, or relatively new element in EGI. Many of the providers, I think 16, receive virtual access grants to deliver cloud and HTC compute capacity here. We chose these providers through an internal process in EGI, considering the diversity of compute flavors and the diversity of capabilities and locations that these providers can offer. The second group that the project includes are the so-called policy-based access. We have several new players here that joined EGI in the forms of Memorandum of Understanding recently. And through this Memorandum of Understanding, we put down some cornerstones on how we will involve them into resource allocation and in community support. They will not receive grants from the project to deliver the capacity. Therefore, typically the access mode will be based on selection of communities of their choice, communities, for example, that are working in their countries and they have the national mandate to support those communities. And last but not least, we signed Memorandum of Understandings and Partnership Agreement with 2 public clouds, Cloudflare and T-Systems, who will also contribute to the overall resource allocation process. The second aspect of the infrastructure support is Hpc integration. And that's a topic often asked about in EOSC meetings, and hopefully the project will make a significant change here by aiming to provide interoperability guidelines and practices for HPC operators on how to offer services in EOSC in such a way that they are suited for the user community's purposes. They are best accessible for the typical workloads, including containers, including observation of accounts, accounting and help desk. And they facilitate users not only to access HPC, but to access HPC together with other infrastructures such as clouds or different types of HTC systems in order to run hybrid workflows. We also want to integrate these HPC systems into the user support fabric of EOSC in order to enable the cross-use across providers and across sectors. The specific activities that the project will do to achieve that objective is that on one hand, we have 4 consortium members linked to the Euro-HPC joint undertaking as well, who will bring in HPC systems into EOS. They will be the pilots that will develop these interoperability guidelines. They will have partners for this from scientific communities. We have 4 scientific validation use cases from different types of physics as well as from climate research domains, who will test run the use of these HPC systems through EOS in order to run hybrid workflows. And we will coordinate this whole activity with the broader HPC landscape through the Euro-HPC initiative and through the Euro-CC project, with which we also signed an MOU, and you could maybe heard about that yesterday in a HPC session where there was an Euro-CC presentation. So let's move on the other layers of the project. We have these infrastructure providers, but don't forget that we have additional providers in and around EGI. We have additional sites in EGI, and we have additional peer infrastructures in EGI with which we already work together on resource allocation for international or intercontinental communities. On top of this, the project delivers access management services through the check-in system, and will operate different managed platforms to help scientific communities manage workloads, manage data. These workload and data management tools are suited for quite diverse purposes. I'm not going into the details, but depending on the use cases, we can mix and match these solutions and stitch them together for a given use case. And of course, they come with different access environments, whether they are online portals or APIs or different types of scripting interfaces. On top of all this, the project will manage a resource allocation process that will be responsible for picking, choosing, and connecting together the elements for a given use case or given community. And we will expect use cases to come in through different channels, from the consortium, from the EOS portal, and also from the EGI channels, which we continue to operate, such as the EGI website and the marketplace. And as these inputs and user requests come in, basically through the project support teams, through the service-specific experts, we will create these allocations for a given community use case, for example, for one of the data space communities that are in the project from INES, connecting together specific applications, specific platforms, specific compute resources in order to deliver the capability that that community needs. And these will be custom setups, each for a given project or for a given community, irrespective of the source of the request. So let me move on to this community engagement aspect. In the project, we have already 13 communities that operate or will operate the so-called data spaces. A data space is basically a custom environment that are composed of generic tools, community-specific applications, community-specific data sets, community-specific tools and generic tools, platforms from the project, all operating together with the cloud and the HPC and HTC systems that we operate in order to deliver domain-specific data exploitation platform. These data spaces will offer high-level gateways, typically together with applications and data sets that are available for access for the scientific end users. We have 13 data spaces in the project. You can see here the disciplinary split or spread of these. I'm not going into the details. And we are not stopping there. We will sign up additional 7 during the course of the project through the integration support. These data spaces, or some of them, will also benefit from the peer infrastructures from outside of Europe. For example, MEERKAT, just to name one. MEERKAT astronomy community is mostly located in the South African region and will benefit from the resources there as well as the resources in Europe in order to enable astronomy workflows. And we go even further with the data spaces. The project will provide a fair maturity assessment to those and will make recommendations to improve the fairness of these. This will be a very serious activity run together with the rest of EOSC and with the core of EOSC, where the fairness of data and fairness of services is of highest importance. Let me finish with the outlook towards other users, of how to get involved. We will deal with certainly with two types of users. One will be the research users who want to use these facilities to run experiments or to set up large-scale data spaces. And we will have suppliers, compute centers, who will also want to join this endeavor and want to contribute to the platform. The project will provide ways to engage with both of these. We will do this in collaboration with the Eos Future Project, but we will do more. On this slide, I try to compare what Eos Future will do to expand the Eos user base and supplier base and what EGI-ACE will contribute here. So Eos Future, you will hear later from Owen, is the big project that will start next year. It will run many of the core elements of EOSC. And the EGI partners already contribute to different activities such as training, and the EGI-ACE will contribute the annual call that the Eos Future is planning to run, as well as we are planning to have more specific compute calls twice per year. We will contribute to the user support area with service-specific support, with service-specific training that we have in the EGI-ACE project, as well as integration support that we have across platforms or across compute systems. Concerning the events, the EOS event program for the next year, from the next year, is still to be defined. What we know for sure is that as EGI-ACE, we would like to organize 2 project flagship events and 1 public event per year. We continue the webinar program, which we started as EGI webinars this year with a huge success. This program is still active. We have a couple of events coming up later this year, so I also encourage you to attend those. In a similar structure, we will continue with the focus on the EGI-ACE services and portfolio. We will write integration handbooks and will support the integration of data spaces and integration of additional suppliers through different types of events. We call those boot camps, which we can be interactive, very specific to providers and users. So let me conclude the presentation with this slide, which puts together the different key exploitable results that in the next 2.5 years, the project will produce. We will deliver free at point of view services, IT resources, data and analytics services through the EOS portal. We will provide training, handbooks, and consultancy to diverse audiences. We will improve the service management system of EGI in order to encompass new challenges with EOSC, new challenges on the computing landscape. We will provide interoperative toolkit together with the EOSC stakeholders and with the biggest EOSC interoperability framework. And at the end of the project, we will deliver also a strategy and recommendations towards the Eos governance on how the Eos computing infrastructure should continue beyond EGI-ACE. With that, I would like to thank you for the attention.
Thank you, Gergely. I don't see questions in the chat window, so I think we can proceed with Owen and the next presentation. While Owen gets ready with the slides, I'd like to say 2 words. Eos Future is a project which is expanding the activities of Eos Hub and continuing many of these, especially with the core. We'll focus on the core services, the overall Eos core provisioning, and strong support towards integration of data, software, and thematic services from the S3 research communities. So as you know, Eos Hub is reaching an end in a few months in spring next year. With that, we will be ready to hand over a number of key exploitable results and continue their development thanks to the engagement of our partners in this project. So Owen is going to explain all about it, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Tiziana. Hopefully you can all hear me well. Yeah, my name's Owen Appleton. I've met many of you before looking at the participant list, and I'd like to talk a little bit about Eos Future, which is the other big project on the horizon that we expect to see next year. Pardon the slightly punnish name. Before I get into the slides, I can't go into quite the same level of detail as Gerge, partly because this is a 40.9 million euro project. It's really very, very large. And also because a lot of the details are still in negotiation with the Commission. So this is, should we say, an early rather than definitive look at how this project will turn out, but I think I can still give you some useful information. To set the scene a little bit, how we get here, I can actually change slide. There has been an evolution in the Eos ecosystem since it began a number of years ago. And this is by no means a complete picture, but there's certainly perhaps at least three main strands that we can see to this. There are a number of projects in the infrastructure domain, starting with Eos Pilot, obviously, Eos Hub, which EGI is very heavily involved in, as you know, also projects like InfraCentral, Enhanced, the latest of the open air projects, which have developed a kind of strong strand that is necessary for a successful EOSC, but it's by no means the only strand that's been going on. At the same time, perhaps a little bit more recently than some of these projects, we've seen a more community-driven strand of EOSC projects, certainly the InfraEOSC 4 and 5B projects, so the thematic and regional clusters. Although I would stress, and I was being reminded by Gerge just yesterday, there are many other community projects which can and will contribute to EOSC, but these are perhaps some of the most directly EOSC-targeted community engagement and building projects which have been going on. And alongside these projects, there's obviously the governance layer. Gerge was mentioning Eos Governance. There is a governance board and the executive board, and I'm sure most of you are aware of these large number of working groups and then many, many task forces underneath them that have been going on for the last year or two. And those at least are due to end at the end of this year. Eos Hub early next year. Some of these other projects continue and overlap with the next phase, but certainly we're at a transition point. And really, after this year, we're looking at three large-scale entities which we expect to see, or large groups. One is the Eos Future Project, which already has a rather pretty-looking logo up at the top there, which I would say is a connection of both what's been going on in the infrastructure and the community layer. Certainly, it involves all the major infrastructures and certainly the thematic clusters and many, many members of the regional clusters as well. Accompanying this, there is also the InfraEOSCO 7 projects, of which EGI-ACE is a good example, but there are a number of other ones which focus on different aspects of the kind of services and resources we'll see for EOSC. And on the governance level, we won't any longer have governance boards and executive boards. We have since this summer the EOSC Association, an ASBL, set up in Brussels. This is the new picture, the new landscape we're moving into. It doesn't replace all of the work we've done, it builds on it, and a lot of our other projects will continue to overlap with this, but that's why it's a timely moment to look at what's coming next. Before I do, oh, I see one error on this slide, I'm afraid. Two small terminology points, although one I think has really already been covered in many other talks. The first is that previously we spent a lot of time talking about services, about data, about papers, software, publications. In Eos Future and in quite a lot of other work which is now going on, there has been a shift to talk about Eos resources as a way of talking about all of these different elements which contribute to Eos on an even basis. This is necessary to simplify things so we don't have to have different descriptions of what we do with data, what we do with publications, what we do with services, but also to stress that there are commonalities, and indeed sometimes it's getting harder to draw lines between these different kinds of elements as well. So if you look at the work around Eos Future, you'll often see discussion of Eos resources. Alongside that, and I think this has already been shown by Gerge, rather than talking about a federating core, about a hub portfolio or a hub of EOSC, we now talk about EOS core, a federated data layer, and the EOS exchange. And this is the description that comes from the EOS Sustainability Working Group reports, the Tin Man and now the draft Iron Lady report, which I suspect will be out kind of fully publicly fairly soon, but it's been distributed widely, including at the EOS Symposium week, just the other week. Hopefully you have some awareness of what these are. I'm going to talk a little bit about not the definitions of them, but at least how EGI is contributing to them, because I think this is clearly the timely topic for our event this week. So going beyond Eos Cub and looking at what are the EGI elements, the EGI community, and I stress that this is the EGI Foundation in Amsterdam, certainly, but much more the EGI Federation and the broad community that you all represent, has for a long time mobilized many useful elements which EOS will need, which we can certainly think of as resources in the description that I just gave. They have been doing this for a very long time. The work to develop these resources more recently has been channeled largely through the Eos Cub project, although through other projects as well, and now certainly the Eos Infra-Eos 4 and 5B projects. And there has been a translation of what it is that we do as the EGI community into something that can sit in EOS, and this then has helped to populate the new view we have of EOS for next year. So not to go through every line, but to give you some examples, Eos Core on the lower right, this is the part of Eos which is the internal services, the internal resources that keep Eos operating. And this is certainly analogous and connected to the internal services and resources that EGI as a community uses to keep itself operating. These are the ones that are coordinated by the foundation, but are provided by the members of EGI. And I've mentioned some of the providers here, the help desk from KIT, GGAS and Apple from SDFC, the security coordination, which comes from a number of different groups. I won't go through them all in detail. These then map into Eos Cub resources, which I think most people are quite familiar with, which have previously been called the Hub portfolio of Eos Cub. So this becomes the Eos Cub help desk, the marketplace provided by CypherNet, monitoring and accounting, order management, AI, etc. And these flow directly into Eos Core in the future. So we cannot guarantee that it is directly the EGI solutions which will end up as the permanent solutions in Eos Core, but I think it's very likely that many of them will feature in the long-term version of the Eos Core, or at a bare minimum, the experience that we've generated in running these services and resources for EGI and for Eos Hub will have a major impact on how the core of Eos will look in the future. Federated data up to now hasn't been so much in focus, so I'll skip over that for a moment. But for the Eos Exchange here, we're looking not at the internal resources to keep Eos operating, but the researcher-facing resources at various levels. So this is what you expect to see as the contents of a marketplace or catalog. And this goes from quite basic infrastructure as a service all the way up to pretty specific software as a service type resources, as well as increasingly data publications, etc. Within the EGI community, clearly, we federate a number of major communities, and I've mentioned only a few here. GEOS, VNMR, often an example. DODAS, IANINES. These have been not brought together directly by EGI always, but certainly federated and supported by EGI. And we have supported their inclusion in projects like Eos Hub, where they've formed part of the competence centers, the thematic services we've seen, also things like the early adopter program services coming out of Eos Hub, and also the DIH pilots. So these are pilots from the Digital Innovation Hub for EOSC, which are experiments in how the commercial sector can, in different ways, interact with EOSC, generate new services, benefit from EOSC resources and understanding. All of these will flow into EOSC Exchange. This is certainly how we see it. So I think we can definitely see that the work we've been doing for the last few years in Eos Hub, but in fact the 10 years of EGI all flows quite directly into what's going on in EOSC. EOSC is not the only target of our work as EGI, but for this talk I'm stressing the ways we're contributing to the EOSC Exchange to EOSC Core. Now obviously there is also EGI-ACE. I'm not going to go into details here because I think Jorge has done this much more successfully than I could in the time I have available, but we certainly see a large number of these resources that will end up in EOSC Exchange being, if not created, certainly coordinated, packaged and delivered to EOSC through the EGI-ACE project. And I suspect we'll see the same from the other Infra-EOSC 7 projects. I also think this will be a space where we start to much more go into the federated data layer as well. I think the federated data layer for the whole of EOSC is perhaps the least well understood or described right now in the work that's gone on within the sustainability working group and elsewhere. So that's partly why we have a little bit less detail here, but I think you'll see a lot more of that in the next year or so. And just to also stress, EGI will continue to work on many areas outside of the Eos Future Project and just EOSC. I think we heard already this week about the work on Destination Earth and the other destinations from the future funding programs from the EC, which will be important targets of our work as well. So unlike Georg's presentation, I'd like to look a little bit at what Eos Future will look like on the inside, but not at the same level of detail. And I don't want to go through it, you know, just the financial parts or just the numbers, but I do want to give you some idea of what the work packages look like, not in detail, but to give you an impression of what this project is going to be like, what its goals are. Having stressed Eos Core and Eos Exchange as two really crucial parts of the future EOSC, it's no surprise to see that there are work packages or clusters of work packages which map very directly to these things. There is a cluster of 3 work packages around Eos Core, you can see in green, which deal with the not just development of new internal or core services, but more the improvement, the integration, the connection, the maturing of these services together into a coherent package and the delivery of them to the EOS community, both in terms of creating these resources and also crucially operating these resources. So there's a whole work package just on operations, which in fact EGI will lead. There is also a work package 6, of which very much maps to the Eos Exchange. So here we are talking about onboarding or connecting resources from the communities, bringing them into catalogs so that they are visible through EOSC and accessible through EOSC. Also, not just collecting data about resources, but also integrating them with the Eos Core, so to benefit from the capabilities of Eos Core, but also integrating them with each other to some extent. And this will be seen especially through the test science projects with communities, which are in effect large-scale use cases that stress the integration of different services and resources, the composability of resources to really allow for added value over just being able to find everything in Europe, which otherwise would be the sort of basic value that we're delivering, perhaps. There are other elements which I won't go into in too much detail. There's obviously an area of strategy and engagement, particularly engagement with the EOSC Association. There's a section on architecture and interoperability. We're definitely going to need strong interoperability frameworks and guidelines in order to be able to do all of the connection of the services and resources within the core and in the exchange as well. There is an important training work package, which I guess Georg already mentioned our contributions to in some detail. And finally, there is an area on commercial services. One difference to previous efforts is that the work on commercial services is a little bit more integrated than it has been in the past, especially around procurement. The OCRI project, which many of you are aware of, which focused very much on procurement, a lot of the things that it was doing have now been sort of brought into the plans for Eos Future. So there will be an embedded procurement function, although exactly how this works we'll have to see. And there's also the continuation of the Eos Digital Innovation Hub, which has been very successful in the Eos Cup. Just to sort of mention at least briefly, where does EGI appear in this? Everywhere you see an EGI logo, which is almost everywhere. EGI is the EGI Foundation is a participant, but it's not always the foundation itself. This is the foundation and also the linked third parties, which I think I've managed to cover all of in the logos on the right, one way or another. So really, I think you can see we're everywhere as a community together. And this is just EGI and the linked third parties. If we add in the other members of the EGI community who are full partners of this project themselves, the picture gets even more confusing. But I think you can really see how crucial all of our work is to what's going to go on in the next 30 months of the Eos Future Project. I think based on the hard work of all of you around Eos Hub, around your own internal efforts in many different communities and all the other projects you contribute to. So really we're a key element to this moving forward. And in my last kind of minute or so, I don't want to go through the strict objectives of the project, because while they're very good, they're written as proposal objectives, which are not always the most illuminating thing. So rather, I just want to end with what I think is the sort of meta message of this project. And again, to stress, it's still a negotiation. It's 40.9 million, so it's very, very large, but I think these are perhaps some key takeaways. One of the first things this project has to do is to build and evolve Eos Core. This isn't starting from scratch. We know there's a huge amount of work that's been done in many different efforts to push this, notably Eos Cub, which many of you are a part of. Eos Future needs to take up this work from Eos Cub and other projects and stitch it together to meet the requirements, the required capabilities for the Eos Core, as described by this latest Iron Lady report from the Sustainability Working Group. And I think here we really look very strong in that a lot of this work has already been done in various communities, including this one. And I think EGI community members, federation members will be very noticeable in all these activities. Next, we have to populate the Eos Exchange. We have to bring in more resources. We already brought in quite a lot of resources in the Eos portal through Eos Cub, through the EGI Federation and the whole community plus Eos Enhance. We need to grow this further through the thematic clusters and also engaging with new communities. And that's one reason I'm very happy to see EGI-ACE going beyond the borders of Europe so explicitly. I think these are all other communities we want to bring in. And we need to push a system of systems approach. The more I find myself talking about what's going on here, the more it becomes clear that there isn't an appetite for a single monolithic EOSC, which forces its solutions on existing, mature, and effective communities. Rather, we have to find a way to stitch these communities together so that they maintain their sovereignty, their special character, their added value, but also together produce something which is where the sum is greater, sorry, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And we have strategies to do this, but it's going to be certainly challenging and something that needs to be worked on very effectively in this project. A lot of this will be to do with having common resource catalogs and also some sort of interoperability framework, which we can all use together to allow for a flow of information about resources across EOSC without having to make everyone take a single entry point to EOSC. However, these three, should we say, messages, none of them are really pushing into a new area. Most of them are sort of broadening work we were already doing, broadening communities we already supported. That's fine, but we also do need to go into new spaces as well. So there is also a need to innovate and expand the scope of EOSC. We need to look at what business models will really be effective for the long term. We need to integrate procurement, I think, much more effectively and expand the work around the digital innovation hubs. This will be very interesting. Also, there's a push to add, for instance, AI capabilities to portals and catalogs, and really overall to move from just collating the resources we have in these communities to really integrating them and making for something composable that supports new kinds of research in future. So I know I'm a minute or so over, but that's my very brief introduction to Eos Future. Hopefully we'll have a lot more information for you in the coming months. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Owen. Thanks a lot for this presentation. Any question from the audience? You will hear a lot about this project, don't worry. Okay, well, thank you again, Owen. If there is no question on the chat or live, I think we can then move into the very last part of this conference. So, as you know, while I'm struggling to open my settings for sharing the presentation, there is an important part of this closing to thank people and to learn from what we have been organizing in the last few days. So let me share my slides first. Okay, I hope you can hear me and see my slides. This is the largest event we had in our history, and unfortunately this is due to very sad situation in our continent and in the world. We have learned that making information more accessible through video conferencing is important. So with 768 registrations, I think we helped our community to grow and sharing in their results. So surely we will learn from this success for the future. striving to make these events as accessible as possible to a very large audience. So thanks for your contribution. I'm very happy to see that we had a very wide coverage. I'm proud to see the data center administrators, as these are the pillars of the EGI Federation. And it's very important to have them on board and sharing their expertise and innovation. Managers and directors were engaged in policy sessions. So thanks for also this segment of our delegates for your dedication and input to the program. And very good to see 173 researchers. I think we always strive, and this is difficult, to have a good representation of user communities and expert users. And I think this shows we are getting there. So very good to see. I'm very, very happy. 300 organizations, 53 countries. And you won't be surprised if I say that the Netherlands are the largest. But I guess all the EGI.eu people were somehow obliged to be in the event or not supposed to be in the garden drinking a beer or sunbathing. So this is kind of expected that we have a large participation from the Netherlands, but also Germany. So very nice to have a large German community, a lot of contributions, and from UK, which I think is a political sign. Research has no borders and likes open borders in Europe. I like to also bring some information. Eos Cub has been our flagship project. I said in the opening, it's thanks to this project and to the support of the Commission that we have intensified collaborations with user communities. And this is the best that we can do as a community of infrastructure providers, to have active support. I think EGI needs to improve this area strategically. We are discussing these in the Council as one of our objectives. We need to do more and better in supporting user communities. This is one of our priorities. Eos Cub is closing. We have a final event together with the Social Sciences and Humanities cluster. And Freya, and you are invited to join in. There is also a call for booths and demonstrations. So if you have interesting work and you want to showcase that, please take a look at the program. I have to announce the best demonstration, and I hope we have our demo people ready to jump in for a short presentation of their work. The winners are the team of the University of Valencia, led by Ignacio Blanquet, Amanda Calatrava, Miguel Caballé, and German Molto. Congratulations, thanks for your demo. And if someone in the team is online, the floor is yours to say a few words about your demo. I'm just looking at the chat to see.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Tiziana. Thank you very much, everybody, for this, this prize. I'm very glad to hear. I'm very honored to have this award, which is a work that has been not only quite intensively done by all my team, especially by Amanda and Miguel, who are the main developers of this part, but also I want to thank EGI for the support, because it was partly supported by the Strategic and Innovation Fund program, which we found very, very interesting and good. I think that Miguel has a couple of slides, if he has the opportunity to show, if you consider. We don't.
Yes, you can hear me, but I need permissions in order to share. I have no permissions.
Just allow a bit of time to switch permissions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, so only a brief description of what the ECAS service is. As its name suggests, it's a service to deploy Kubernetes cluster, elastic Kubernetes cluster on top of EGI cloud compute resources. It is based on a tool called EC3 that comes from Elastic Cloud Computing Cluster, and in particular, it's using the application demand instance that we have deployed. It only requires the users to have an EGI check-in account and to be part of the access BO in order to traffic the service. And the user is guided with a very simple wizard with a step-by-step process in order to deploy the Kubernetes cluster. And as Nacho said, it has been partially funded by the second EGI Strategy and Innovation Core. This is the architecture. It is quite simple. The user accesses the EC3 portal, and with a few clicks, it has it selects the features of its Kubernetes cluster, and it is submitted to the infrastructure manager service that finally contacts the cloud site and deploys initially only a front end. This front end, the Kubernetes dashboard and app is available for the user, but also it's available the Kube apps application. It enables the user to easily install Helm applications on top of his cluster using a graphical interface. Then, when the workload of the cluster requires it, the software that is installed out in the front end, that is Plus, which is an elastic management framework, adds or removes the needed working node depending on the workload submitted by the user. Finally, there are some links where you can find information. Third one is the link to the EC3 application demand portal. You here have also the link to the information in the EOS portal. Here they have the link to the GitHub source code of the EC3 client tool. And you also have the Docker image in order to use the EC3 client. Finally, you also have the link to some information of the applications on demand portal. I will also copy in the chat now the link of the YouTube video where you have the full demo.
Thank you, Miguel. Thanks for these technical highlights. Kubernetes was a big topic in the conference these days, so the demo and its support just confirms this. So thank you for this work, and thanks to your team in Valencia.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you. You will receive a nice present. I'm not going to spoil the surprise, but I hope you will find it nice and nice recognition from the community for your work. I'd like to resume my presentation, and we'll really get to the end. I'd like to thank a lot of people, and let me move a bar here. The thanks go to the program committee, their dedication, and also to the communication team of IN2P3 with Gaël Cheffren leading it. They have been very supportive. We wanted to have a conference in Lyon, and we were so keen and sure that we could meet again in June. This was not possible, but many thanks to their work and dedication. The other thanks go to our Zoom managers, what we call them, the Zoom heroes, our people that you see here. I can't name everyone, but big thanks to your technical support. It's not negligible what you've done, and it's a lot of work to have this going on well at larger scale. So thank you, and I hope the technical glitches were not too disturbing. Actually, I have a special thank. I want to thank Dimposo Cartara And Dimpo has been the glue, the person chasing everyone and making sure that this event could progress despite of the many reschedulings and the changes of program due to COVID. And I hope Dimpo can share her screen for a moment, or maybe later after the thanks. I like you to show up because you lead also the communications, and Dimpo with Julia will be your front desk whenever you have communication activities that are relevant to EGI to support you. So big thanks to all of you and Dimpo. We have a feedback survey. Take a moment to look at the URL. You will be reached out as well. Your feedback is useful to understand if this event format has to be improved in the future. I think we surely will use more online events for the time being. So feedback on how to structure this is very useful. And finally, we want to have a photo moment, as in every conference. We like to remember the people that have been participating, and specifically here for this closing plenary. So I will stop sharing now, and if you want and you can, please open your camera. We will take screenshots to remember this yearly conference and our 10 years of EGI.eu. Thank you. Dimpo, you are online, I think, perhaps busy taking pictures.
Yes. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you,
great.
Dimpo.
Yeah.
Now we can see you and everyone will know you.
Yes. Let me just take these screenshots first, if everyone's ready. Moving to the second page. Oh, wait, I'll do the first page again. I see Sergey joined. Smile. This is really great. And one more page. Yes, I got them all. Thank you.
Thank you again, everyone. And I think we can close now the conference and have a virtual applause for everyone who has been here with us. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.